solely funded and powered by working class people like you and me. This is important because while other politicians are taking funds from real estate developers and police unions and will be beholden to them once they take office, we will only be beholden to you
Mhm.
all. All funds will be used to help us disseminate our platform with pamphlets, flyers, merch, promotions online, and in newspapers. Please consider donating now by clicking the link in my bio. All right. Well, this week we are accompanied by Jeremiah Cedeño, a
You got
co-founder
it.
of City Workers for New York City, and he's a city worker himself. So Jeremiah, tell us a little bit about your organization, when you
Yeah,
guys got founded,
you're right.
what type of work are you guys fighting for at the moment?
Absolutely. Well, firstly, I want to thank you for opening up this space for myself, just to talk about the work of the group. It's not the efforts of one person, but the efforts of a lot of people. Definitely, the work that has been done up to now is the byproduct of a lot of effort from different folks, a lot of folks across different spectrums within city government and former city government. So, definitely thank you for that. And thank you for you, and I'm excited for what you're doing, and grateful for your support of the remote work platform and the remote learning
Mhm.
platform that city workers have been taking. So thank you for that. Um, City workers started back in the summer of 2020, right after the murder of George Floyd.
Mhm.
City workers, at the time I worked for New York City Census 2020, which was an office under Mayor Bill de Blasio. And I remember we had a team debrief the day after the murder, and there was so much angst and hurt and sadness and frustration, and we also felt like our hands were tied as city workers,
Mhm.
right? There was a lot of cries coming out of our community about budgetary justice, about realigning the budget of the NYPD. There was a lot of cries for police reform. There was a lot of cries for the reinvestment into our schools, our low income
Mhm.
communities, our black and brown communities. And we felt like we this was the appropriate time for city workers to get involved, to have a platform to share thoughts of solidarity with our community, with the New Yorkers that we represent. And so I talked to some great census folks, Ian Harrison, Hillary, a bunch of great New York City census folks, Irina. We came together, just giving them shout outs in case they watch. We came together and we created this group with that mindset of being a platform to de-silo city government, to bring transparency within city government.
Mhm.
And so we launched during that time, and when city council was voting on the budget. And we have been for the last part of the since 2020 until now. We've been not only advocating for transparency within city government, not only have we been calling out Mayor Bill de Blasio on all his failed plans and all his broken promises. We've been holding power accountable.
Mhm.
We've been bringing truth to power. We've stood alongside community organizations made up of all different types of people from all different walks of life. We have stood by New Yorkers through this pandemic. City workers are New Yorkers. It's something that people forget. City workers are New Yorkers. City workers are made up of people of color
Mhm.
that live in night development buildings.
Right.
City workers are people that are working hard. City workers are not rich as much as
No.
people may think that we are. We're not rich.
We're definitely not.
We're not rich. I was just telling you in the pre warm up that I was wearing Shacks. I can't afford a pair of Jordans.
Yeah.
So um, city workers. City workers. We've stood alongside our community throughout this pandemic, and we've also stood with organizations like the Street Vendor Project. Right. Recently, with what's happened with Diana in the Bronx, we've stood alongside her. So that's a very brief and quick how we started, where we are, and we're hoping to continue as the years come, reforming and reshaping the way work is done within city government.
Mhm. And it's interesting that you say, like that you mentioned you guys started right after summer
Mhm,
2020. George
mhm,
Floyd hit. We had protests erupt
mhm.
throughout the nation. I
Yep,
mean, I remember I was like, I'm a city worker. I mean, I think most people know that, but
yep,
that follow me, I'm a teacher. And I remember going to a protest and just like praying that I wouldn't get arrested, because as city workers,
yep.
there's like very strong repercussions. And I'm gonna say it was like hell. I was
Mhm,
living in Elmhurst. I couldn't
yep,
sleep. I was, we were like being bombarded by the ambulances because
Yeah.
I was a few blocks away from Elmer's Hospital.
Yeah.
I mean, you walked outside, there was a truck of
Yeah.
dead bodies. Um, we were working till like 11, 12 a.m., like
Mhm.
tutoring kids, troubleshooting their Wi-Fi, trying to get them food. A lot of them didn't have the devices they needed to
Mm.
learn.
Mhm.
And then the protest erupt, right? And then we're like, well, we also need to support this, right? Like, um and it felt like almost a like everything went to hell, and then there was hope.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Because
Mhm.
you saw how everybody came together, right?
Yep.
Mutual aid programs came around.
Yep.
Everybody was outside protesting. People that I never, that
Yep.
had never been political in their life had
Yep.
like a political awakening.
Yep.
And we started demanding things, right? We
Mhm.
started demanding the defunding of the police, the
Mhm.
reinvestment into our schools, into
Mhm.
after school programs, violence intervention programs, into housing,
Mhm.
all of these things. And it was so clear how important it was, right? Because
Mhm.
boom, we had a world pandemic, and those people that were living in communities like the one that I was living in, that were immigrant communities, high populated communities, because of the fact that rent is so
Yep.
expensive, you had to live multiple families in one house. Um and people, we really thought, I felt like I really thought there was going
Mhm.
to be a lot of transformation that
Yeah.
came out of that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And then we come here, we're met today, right?
Mhm.
Where a year ago, or almost a year and a half ago now, yeah, we were being called like heroes,
Mm.
we're
Mhm.
saving the
Mhm.
communities, all of
Mhm.
this stuff. And now
Mhm.
we're here today where we're being called lazy
Yep.
again,
Yep.
on and off. We're called heroes and lazy, heroes and
Yep.
lazy.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
And then we're seeing that, um the Democratic candidate, at least, is completely in support of more funding for police, of
Mhm.
bringing back stop and frisk,
Mhm.
which, I mean, it ranged by year, but it was anywhere in between 85 to like up to, I think it's 95% of people that were stopped were Black and Latino, mostly
Yep.
Black and Latino youth.
That's right.
And about 90% of those people stopped were innocent.
Yep.
That
That's right.
meant that 90% of the Black and Latinos that were being stopped were completely innocent, and were just being stopped
Yes.
and harassed, right?
Yep.
And
Yep.
we see, and then we see now schools reopening, right?
Mm.
And the only thing that they're focusing on is this vaccine mandate, right? They're like,
Mhm.
this is what's
Mhm.
gonna keep us safe, right? But how
Yeah.
about the housing issue, right? How about the
Yep.
fact that people didn't have safe places to live,
Mhm.
right? How
Mhm.
about the food insecurity, right?
Yes.
So anyway, so tell me a little bit about what city workers for your NYC is demanding around those things today.
Yeah. Well, a few things I just want to touch on that you mentioned. We were in a situation like this 20 years ago, right? Because if you remember when the towers fell,
Mm,
there was so much solidarity around New
yeah.
York City. There was so much solidarity, and that was a travesty, a tragedy in its own right, right? Like
Mhm.
that was horrible. We all remember where we were, but what we forget as a city is the process after the towers fell.
Mhm.
When the towers fell, everybody placed a lot of emphasis on the NYPD and the FDNY, which I think we can all agree that yes, they ran in there, they did their jobs, they sacrificed themselves. It was very heroic what they did. What
Mhm.
everybody forgets was all the city workers that also kept the city afloat and during the recovery process after
MTA
9/11.
workers. Yep. Mhm.
Everybody forgets that. Everybody forgets the sanitation department. Everybody forgets the teachers that had to deal with the schools closing and the schools closing early and parents coming to pick up the kids. Everybody forgets the train workers having to deal, the MTA having to deal with the trains stopping and the buses and people trying to cross the bridge. And so you fast forward till now, and like you said, last year we were all heroes. Everybody was banging pots and talking about how amazing all were, but the emphasis was only placed on a select few.
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying? And my father works in the medical field. So by no means do I belittle the work that the first responders did.
Right.
And my
Yeah.
father is an immigrant. My father came here from Ecuador, and my mom is Boricua. So it's like this is personal to me. I love and respect the work that all our first responders did. But once again, city workers are forgotten.
Mm-hmm.
City workers did a lot of work behind the scenes, remotely, keeping the city afloat.
Yep.
Remotely, and I used the example of 9/11, and in no way do I make a parallel between like the tragedies themselves, but what happened after. During if you remember the recovery of 9/11, Mayor Giuliani at the time rushed the cleanup process because
Mm-hmm.
he got to get the city back up and running. There was not appropriate time to grieve. There was not even enough time to let the workers down there know that the air was contaminated.
Right.
There was
Exactly.
there was a rush to get the financial district back up and running after while smoke and the air was still contaminated from the towers falling.
Mm-hmm.
And a rush back to open the city hurt a lot of people. And you look back where we fast forward to where we are now. The Mayor de Blasio's desire to it's funny because greed doesn't recognize political parties.
Mm-hmm.
Greed is not exclusive to a political party.
Mm-hmm.
And people forget, and you see where we are now, and the mayor rushing to reopen the city. We all want to go back to life the way it was. If I could sign a paper and say go back to 2019 and have life the way it was, I would love to do that. But we had this pandemic. This pandemic has showed us that remote work does work, and
Mm-hmm.
that and I can't help but think with this. I'm vaccinated, but I can't help but think that there's so much politics going on with this vaccine mandate that it's hurting people. Communities of color have a lot of mistrust,
Mm-hmm.
and it hurts when the mayor talks about a safe reopening and the plan is horrible. You have city workers that are depressed. You have mold fall in
Mm-hmm.
people's buildings. You have windows that are bolted shut. You have directors and commissioners that are not even wearing their masks or acknowledging the social distancing rules. You have city workers that are finding out through our page that colleagues are getting sick on COVID because leadership isn't letting them know. So,
Right.
for me, it's hypocritical for the
Mm-hmm.
mayor to say that this vaccine, everything, because again, I'm vaccinated. So I'm not. This is not an anti-vaccine message. I believe in everybody's opinion to choose what they want. But what I'm saying is that the politics behind this
Mm-hmm.
is what's hurting what everybody wants, right? Everybody wants to get on and get past this pandemic. And the mayor's playing politics with people's lives, and it's hurting. And so what we're asking as city workers is remote option. We want a remote option to acknowledge to address the fact that most of the city workers again are people of color coming from low income neighborhoods. There's no reason for administrative staff to have to come into the office if these people have to take Metro North and take trains and take the buses to get to work when they can work from home. A lot of these workers have children, and childcare is still limited because of the pandemic.
Right.
And so what we're asking, we're telling the mayor, at least let us have a seat at the table so that we
Mm-hmm.
can discuss a safe reopening plan. And if we are as a progressive city as we profess to be, then why do we not have a permanent telework option for our city workers?
Mm-hmm.
And why do we not have hazard pay for the work
Mm-hmm.
for the
Yes.
workers that have had to be in the office, right?
Right.
Because this is not simply a remote only situation. A lot of city workers that sometimes get forgotten had to work from their offices throughout this whole pandemic. Why
Mm-hmm.
did they not get offered hazard pay? And
Right.
so where we are is that the city has failed its city workers.
Mm-hmm.
The city has failed its teachers. The city has failed its children, its parents, and its constituents. And
Mm-hmm.
so we're just asking for City Hall to use common sense. It's like what happened with Diane and the street vendors. And the public advocate said it when he spoke, Jamani, that this is the state of the politics of New York City is that we have to tell the mayor to not throw out food.
Mm-hmm.
That's where we are. That in the year 2021, we have to tell a New York City mayor to not throw out food. I can keep going on, but I hope that answers your question. Something
Yes,
I'm
no, for
passionate
sure.
about.
And I think it's something that we agree on at least, we understand where the insecurity is coming from, right?
Mhm. Yeah,
why people don't want to get vaccinated. Why?
absolutely.
Because
Yeah,
at every level, this government has showed us they don't care about our lives. I mean,
absolutely.
how is it possible that the police and sanitation are
Hmm.
throwing out
Hmm.
boxes of fruit and vegetables when 1 in 5 families are food insecure in the Bronx, right?
Absolutely.
How is it possible that we have an $11 billion budget to
Hmm.
a group that is literally, instead of, and there has been studies that show that only 2% of major
Hmm.
crime gets solved by the police, right?
Yep.
And so then they're really using their time for very small, what we call poverty crimes, right?
Hmm.
So that's people that can't pay the MTA,
Yep.
people that may be loitering, right?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
we know how discriminatory that is, because if
Hmm.
you're a white person, a white man walking down the street, you may not be loitering, but if you're a black man
Yep.
walking down the street, then you're loitering, right?
Yep.
And then things like this, right, where
Absolutely.
literally people are trying to make a living
Yep.
after, especially the undocumented community, the
Yep.
immigrant community that was completely forgotten
Yep.
and ignored for so long. I mean, literally, the fund excluded workers just opened in August,
Yeah,
right?
and we're supposed to be a safe haven city for those workers. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Continue. I just wanted to mention that too.
Yes. So literally the aid, and just to speak, and I always like to bring in, the perspective of the immigrant community. But literally, I mean, even throughout the whole pandemic, there was no aid that was offered to undocumented immigrants.
Yep.
There was no unemployment, no
Yep.
anything. So then what happened? They had to continue working in order to
Yep.
make ends meet.
Yep.
Now, what happens with that is that if you have one family member that gets sick, right? The
Hmm.
entire family in that household then gets sick because
Yep.
nobody could really quarantine because everybody's working.
Yep.
And then when that whole family gets sick,
Yep.
there's no
Talk about it.
food. There was nothing, right, that
Hmm.
they were really getting because of
Hmm.
their documentation status.
Yep.
There was no rent relief at the time that was open.
Yep.
So basically, all this to say that we see at every level
Yeah.
how the government has really, sorry, my
It's okay.
dog.
I'm surprised my two haven't barked yet, so it's okay.
We see how the government at every level has kind of like
Absolutely.
given us their back. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah.
And we understand people's insecurities. At the same time, we
Hmm.
know that that people, New York City residents, are forced. They have no option but to
Hmm.
engage with public workers, right?
Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
like, students going to school is
Yep.
mandatory, right?
Yep.
You going to the DMV is mandatory. You going to
Yep.
court is mandatory. If you're getting arrested, you don't have a choice in
Hmm.
it. If you have
Hmm.
to, these are things that you don't have a choice in. And we
Hmm.
understand that now the vaccine is respected and deemed safe worldwide,
Hmm.
and that because people do not have a choice to engage with public workers, we
Yep.
need to ensure that those people engaging with public workers are safe.
Yeah. It really is it, like for me, and I agree with you. But I think it's like there's not enough communication, not enough conversations happening, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like if there's lack of mistrust within communities, if you're not conversing and you're just enforcing, then you're not building coalition.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? And so it's like, and so I think what we're missing in this whole picture is coalition. Again, I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I'm vaccinated. But I think that what's missing for the
Yes.
larger conversation and what you're talking about and what is that we need leadership that has conversations and brings people to the table.
Right. And I think that, it has actually proven, this COVID-19 pandemic has proven how
Mhm.
necessary that is, right?
Yes.
I think it was, I remember when COVID-19 first started, and we were first hearing about it, and we were teaching, and we had all the kids in the classroom.
Mhm.
Really, that the month prior, in like February, there had been I had gone out for like, I
Mhm.
believe, a week because I had a really bad cold and fever. I
Mhm.
don't know whether it was COVID or not, but I did get the flu stuff, and it came out
Yeah.
negative. And then there was tons of teachers that kept calling out, so much so that even the kids were like, "Miss, but y'all don't want to work, or like, what's up?" And I'm like, "No, we're all like sick. We don't have the
Right.
flu, but we
Right.
have
Right. Right.
something." And then the kids were coming in sick. And I remember when we started hearing about COVID-19 in March, we were all like, we need to close the school. And I remember in the beginning, the
Mhm.
demand for us was like, let's close the school for 2 weeks. Let's put everyone that to quarantine, and
Yep.
whoever is positive, stays home or whatever,
Mhm.
and whoever's not comes back, right?
Mhm.
And we were calling for that. And I remember a lot of my friends that worked in the private industry were like, no, we're remote. I was living with my
Yep.
cousin and her husband at the time. They went home and they're like,
Mhm.
you're still working? And they're
Mhm.
like, we're remote, like, 2 weeks
Yep.
ahead of time, right?
Yep.
And we weren't, right? And that cost us, I believe the study was, I think it was 12,000 lives,
Yeah.
if we would
Yep.
have closed schools
Yep.
just a week sooner, the way that the UFT and
Yep.
the teachers had been demanding,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And we know the thing is that workers know the solutions to our community's issues because we create the solutions.
Yes. And because we're New Yorkers, we're from the communities also.
Yes, exactly. Like, yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. What I mean, like, we create. I mean, not yeah, like as city workers that are
Mhm.
from the communities, right?
Yep.
And literally, like, we've created all the solution. The pandemic, literally, I cannot even begin to imagine New York City without mutual aid during the pandemic because we were so
Absolutely.
neglected.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And we literally created all the solutions to the problems that New York City was
Yep.
having, and yet now we're being ignored, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Yet now we literally said before we went back to school, there's no way for us and the thing was that for me, the issue is like, what teachers were like asked about this? There was no vote, there was no, like,
Yep.
no survey. At least I didn't receive any survey from
There was
any.
no conversation.
There
No.
was no conversation, no,
No. No.
no way that we could put our input, right?
Mhm.
But I know that teachers, like, more caucus and have been saying, right, like, we need weekly testing. De
Yes.
Blasio ignores it. No,
Yes.
no, bi-weekly testing.
Um,
Then we have, I think it's within the first week, less than 50% of
mhm.
the schools were tested. We had 600 classrooms that
Yep.
were fully or partially closed,
Yep. Yep.
right? So then he's like, okay, we're gonna do weekly testing. And it's like, bro, we've been like, stop playing with our lives. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Stop playing with our lives.
Yeah.
Because we know that what the vaccine does is it minimizes the symptoms that you'll get if you get COVID-19, right?
Mhm.
But you could still get it. And
Mhm.
if you're immune compromised, and if you get a different strand, like the Delta variant
Right.
or something like that,
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
the consequences could still be very, very severe.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you brought that up because the reality is this, and it goes back to what I mentioned earlier. When the mayor talks about this push for the vaccine, and he's not talking and what he's not talking about is how his reopening plan was reckless from the start.
Mm-hmm.
What he doesn't talk about is how city workers have been walking in to their buildings and not getting health screened. What he's
Right.
not talking about is how the health screen system crashed for some agencies. What he's not talking about
Mm-hmm.
is how some of his commissioners and some of his homies in these agencies don't wear masks, don't
Mm-hmm.
res- don't respect the social distancing.
Right.
So it's like, did you really care about our health all along? If this mandate was always in your pocket and this was the card you were gonna play,
Mm-hmm.
then roll out the mandate, but in a way that was intentional and brought people to the table.
Right.
Don't play with people's lives with politics. Have
Right.
people come in for over a week and a half. Have students get sick, teachers get sick, city workers get sick.
Mm-hmm.
We helped Curb put out an article where city workers are quitting and
Yes.
leaving.
Yes.
And
We had a few, and
yeah, yeah.
and people are looking. I mean, even, the amount of overtime, both paid and unpaid,
Yes,
much of it unpaid, that we had to do in the last 2 years was insane.
absolutely.
It was insane. It was. I mean, I can't. I mean, there was days I was working, like literally still doing Zoom tutoring till
Hmm.
1, 2 a.m. because
Wow.
because we needed kids. The kids were at a learning deficit,
Yeah.
but then if they are not passing, it's like our fault. You know
Yep.
what I mean?
Yep.
So then we're like, all right, well, we need to tutor the kids, and we're like putting in grades
Yep.
and it was so much pressure because it's like if you don't do it,
Yeah.
it's your
It's
fault.
you.
And
You.
like now I'm like, I'm not doing any,
You know.
no overtime.
Mm-mm.
I'm gonna look for overtime positions in other things in
Yeah.
other sectors
Yeah.
because I will burn myself out. And I've been teaching 5 years, but I want to teach hopefully for the rest of my life, even though supposedly our retirement's at 63. I mean, that's a whole other thing. Our pay and our retirement sucks.
Oh man. That.
We don't have a competitive salary. I
Oh.
mean,
Mm-mm.
at
Mm-mm.
all for like,
Mm-mm.
so.
Yeah, no. It's you mentioned the salary and the pay and the overtime, and city workers, as you know, as you've experienced, don't get paid like for the amount of work that we do. We don't get paid for the work that we do. We are underpaid.
Mhm.
We're underpaid. There are positions in the private sector that get double salary what we get paid in the city.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate. And a good example of what this administration looks like is, let's look at Rikers. What's happening at Rikers? The mayor shows up 4 years.
Mhm.
It's been 4 years since he's been there, and acting like he has a plan and he wants to help. This is the mayor that doesn't know anything. He's out
Right.
of touch. He's out of touch. And then the worst part is that that instead, again, when you look at the mayoral race, right? Like
Mhm.
this idea that there's not options, that there's really only one person.
Mhm.
And it's like, this is the problem. The problem is that there's not conversations happening. There's no
Right.
conversations happening, and that is why you have such unrest among the city workforce, because there's no conversations happening with us. We're not at the tables. Teachers are not brought to the tables, and so you have people that are leaving. You have people that are there. I have talked to plenty of city workers, just to give an idea of how our reach has grown. Before September 13th, we were sitting at 1,800 followers on Instagram. We're now
Mhm.
close to 4,000 followers in,
Wow.
in over a week, in over a
Mhm.
week and a half. And literally, it's city workers who have been flooding our
Mhm.
the group's DMs on Instagram and Twitter, expressing how they want to quit, how they're tired, how they're hurt, how they're frustrated. And again, I want to reiterate what I mentioned at the top. Also, our workers who have been in the office saying, why aren't we getting hazard pay? Why is it that
Yeah.
why
And
is it yeah.
like I was one of the teachers that had to go back in person, like
Yep.
as soon as all the times that we opened in person, I was in person. And I don't know, I just feel like we should be getting hazard pay. I feel like, but also, you know, because we are public interest workers working for
Mhm.
public interest, we are so devalued in this society that
Yes.
only values the creation of profit. You
Yep.
know, I know people that work selling, selling materials, whatever material it is, right?
Mhm.
That literally they were sent home, they were paid, their electricity was paid for because they were working from home,
Yep.
their Wi-Fi was paid for,
Yep.
so many things were taken care of because now they're working from home
Yep.
and they didn't have to go into they're still not back, and then it's like us who are literally uh making New York City run. We're working
Yep.
for the public interest, but then everybody's like, that job
Yep.
doesn't matter, or like we shouldn't be paid what we're
Yeah.
supposed to be paid. And
Yeah.
everybody, it, we didn't need unemployment because we were still working and we were working a lot and all of these
Mhm.
things, but at the very least we should receive something, hazard pay, because we put our lives on the line for our community.
Absolutely. And it's funny because I've gotten a lot of reports that I didn't know City Hall moved to Park Slope. And,
Mm.
and I say that because a lot of my city workers who are still kind of remote or hybrid that are in Park Slope, they see Mayor de Blasio wandering around during the workday.
Oh,
So that's what I mean by saying I didn't know that the city
uh-huh.
hall office is moved to Park Slope,
Right.
because like, you're telling us all to come into the office, and you're in the middle of the day walking around in shorts going to go get lunch at your favorite little cafe, and it's like, well, hold on a second, like, Like, why are you not leading by example? Why are you not in City Hall working to address the
Right.
plethora of things that you're leaving in shambles
Mm-hmm.
for whoever is his predecessor, the one that follows him, that's going to have to clean up all that mess that he's leaving behind.
Uh-huh. He's too busy yelling at the dirt bikes and smashing.
I'm I'm like that. For me, I saw that video. I'm like, that was so disrespectful
It
because
was. It was
there's
so.
so much stuff
I'm
going
like,
on.
literally, out of all the things that are happening in New York, food insecurity,
Yeah,
housing
no,
insecurity,
no,
evictions,
yeah.
people foreclosures,
And you know what it is?
homelessness, education, and you're literally gonna go to what looked like a desert and start yelling like a madman at
At
dirt
dirt bikes,
bikes and
at dirt
and
bikes,
crashing.
at dirt
I
bikes.
still can't get over that.
I can't get over the fact that you know what it is really, and you've got me stuck on this topic about how city workers don't get the respect we deserve. It
Hmm.
also stems from the fact that there are a lot of elected officials in this city who do not respect city workers.
Yep.
I'm just saying it as it is. The group has been grateful. We've had some great collaborative work, with like Senator Biaggi and Senator Ramos and the public advocate, candidates such as yourself, Amanda Farias and Shahana Hanif. We've had great
Mhm.
support. But a lot of the sitting and current members that are in the elected body in New York City that we have reached out to and we have talked to don't prioritize our work.
No.
Congress people that are pretty famous, to
Mhm.
not drop names here, but Congress people that are pretty famous are very silent regarding remote learning and remote work.
Yes.
And so it's like,
Or they try to pin us against each other.
exactly. And so it's like, you know, it
Like they try to say, oh, teachers are the ones that don't want to go back. But then you look at the numbers and then it's like most students chose the remote option. You
yep,
know what I mean?
absolutely.
And at the end of the day, look, like you said, like I believe I was one of the teachers. I'm just, I have a lot of energy. I was the first one to get vaccinated. I was like, I need to get
Yeah,
out of my house.
yeah,
I need to go back. But we need a remote option,
yeah,
and we need to do it safely and
yeah.
in a way. And if we are gonna have some people go back, right?
Hmm.
We need to do it in a safe manner. And what we see here is the complete opposite, you
It's
know.
the complete opposite because again, and I've said this a few times in different areas. When De Blasio thought he had a chance at being president, the only people to back him up were the real estate people.
Right.
You
Mm-hmm.
know, De Blasio is delusional enough to believe that he has a governor run in him, and probably the only people that are going to support him in that endeavor, in that failed endeavor, is going to be the real estate people. So like this mad scramble to get people back into offices, and to be and sending out emails to the agencies, getting from telling city workers to go spend food at restaurants and stuff downstairs, which is illegal, by the way, to be sending out those type of emails within city worker offices. And
Mm-hmm.
we've shared that on our social media page where our city workers are getting emails from their agencies telling them go downstairs and go support from like the bid committees. And it's like
Wow.
that's not legal.
Are
You
they
know,
gonna pay for her lunch? No.
yeah, that's not legal, but it's being done again because the mayor's agenda all along has been to curry support with his real estate folks.
Mm-hmm.
And while he's busy playing politics, while he's busy being delusional, and thinking that people, are going to love him on the Global Citizen concerts and all these things, that he thinks he's really popular and really hip. Like what he's doing is he's hurting people.
Yes.
He's hurting
Mm-hmm.
people. He's no different than the former governor, in my
Mm-hmm.
opinion, and he's no different than the former president that was in Washington D.C.
Right.
Just with how reckless and how egotistical he is and these decisions. He's leaving, and the reality is that within the city workers group, we're preparing for a much larger battle. We're preparing.
Mm-hmm.
We're preparing to be organizing for the long haul. And what we need is elected officials and candidates and folks who understand and see the value in city workers and understand that we are New Yorkers. We are deeply invested and we're deeply passionate. And whether you are a librarian, whether you are a teacher, whether you're a sanitation worker, and it's important to mention sanitation workers because the sanitation workers are getting a lot of heat for what's happening with the street vendors.
Oh, they were, yeah.
Yeah,
They were
and they're
fine.
following orders from De
Mm-hmm.
Blasio.
Right.
The same De Blasio who likes to throw the blame on city workers for that.
Right.
When
Hmm.
you sir are the one that lied to the street vendors and promised support and didn't do it.
Right.
When you sir are the one who says that we are a city that welcomes all, but you throw out the livelihood of of a street vendor.
Hmm.
So I'm glad for people like yourself that are opening up these platforms. And you obviously this is something that is personal to you as well because you are a city worker who's doing important work on the front lines. But I encourage everyone that's watching this and any elected official that's watching this to please take us seriously, to please
Hmm.
lend an ear to what we're doing and get involved because we need all that support.
Yeah.
We need that support because what's happening is New York City is going to be without a workforce. You know, you have candidates running for mayor who are saying that should they assume the mayoralship, they're not going to refill the seats that are being emptied.
Yeah.
So we definitely need more support, and we need people paying attention to this.
Hmm. Yeah, and one thing that you mentioned about the real estate developers supporting De Blasio,
Mm-hmm.
Eric Adams has received the most amount of
Oh yeah.
donations from real estate developers in New York than any other candidate.
Yep.
And I think that's very important to say
Mm-hmm.
because you know because my dog just disconnected my lap. Okay. Uh, because of the fact that he is receiving this money from real estate developers, he's going to be beholden to them after he wins,
Yeah. Yeah.
and even when he was meeting with Bloomberg, right? He
Mm-hmm.
had a meeting with Bloomberg. Like, what is he going? If he's this working class candidate, right? That he
Mm-hmm.
says like he's a
Mm-hmm.
working class candidate. Um, why is he meeting with a billionaire? You
Mm-hmm.
know, Bloomberg's wealth went from 4 billion to 59 billion during COVID-19.
Mm-hmm.
Literally, workers would need to make almost $3 million an
Yep.
hour
Yep.
just to make that in 1 year.
Yep.
What does Bloomberg and all of the donors of Eric and most of the donors of Eric Adams' campaign
Mm-hmm.
have in common is that they're millionaires and billionaires, and they have their interest is in
Yeah.
direct opposition to the working
Absolutely.
class.
Yeah.
So even though Eric Adams was working class once upon a time,
Mm-hmm.
uh, now the only people that he associates with are millionaires and billionaires, and those are the people whose interests are in direct opposition to our livelihood and our
Yeah.
well-being. And
Yep.
we just saw that during the COVID-19 pandemic,
Mm-hmm.
where they wanted to continue, and we're
Mm-hmm.
seeing that now with
Mm-hmm.
agencies opening without taking the right safety measures, putting
Yep.
our lives at risk, so
Yep.
that they could ensure that business goes back to usual and
Yep.
they continue to make all the money that they're making.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, it is really, really our duty to fight back, right? And to create solidarity and really fight against every single time that the media tries to pin us against workers,
Yep.
tries to say that, whether it's teachers not having the interests of students or
Yeah.
sanitation workers when
Mm-hmm.
they're really just, following the orders
Yeah.
of the mayor,
Yep.
that we really stick together as working class people of New York, because
Yes.
our interest
Mm-hmm.
is more united than the interests of the rich, who will literally, as we saw, put our lives on the line, like kill us off if
Mm-hmm.
they have to, as long as it'll ensure their profit.
Yeah. And it's important to mention when just quickly about the vaccine that not everyone who's not feeling comfortable with the vaccine is a Trump supporter, right? Because it's important to say because sometimes and because the mayor and
Mm-hmm.
it likes to sometimes make it seem that that's the case because you talked about pitting people against each other, and that's what City Hall is doing.
Mm-hmm.
When you don't have a conversation and don't speak to people, you don't know people's reasoning, and you make assumptions, and that's what City Hall is doing. City
Mm-hmm.
Hall is making assumptions and not conversing with people, not conversing with people about vaccines, not conversing with teachers about the oversized classrooms, not conversing with city workers about the fact that windows are still bolted in some of these offices, so there's no ventilation going on.
Mhm.
We can go on and on, but again, it goes back to that, the fact that there's just there's no conversation happening.
Mhm.
It's all an ill-advised plan by the mayor, as far as not acknowledging that remote works.
Yeah.
Just to curry favor with his real estate folks.
And even with the vaccination, something that he's doing is saying that it's black and brown people that don't
Mhm.
want to get vaccinated.
Exactly.
But then what we
Thank you for bringing
know
that up.
is, I think it's 65% of students of New York City public school students that are age eligible
Hmm.
are vaccinated, right? And it's almost, I think, 90%
Yeah.
of New York City students are black and Latino, black and brown students,
Hmm.
so or students of color. So really, we know what we're seeing, and healthcare workers, right? I think it's 90% of healthcare workers, close to 90% of teachers are vaccinated,
Yes.
right? So we know by these statistics that it's not black and brown communities that are deciding not to get vaccinated. That this is a very dangerous myth that he's
Yeah.
putting out there. That's really putting
Absolutely.
our communities at risk.
Absolutely. Again, because he's not conversing. He's not.
Mm-hmm.
He's not. And the default in the public narrative is to immediately criminalize people because of assumptions, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like we just have to have a conversation. We all, and I feel like if we had more people on our side, when I mean on our side, is city workers' side, that understood city workers' perspectives and understood the work that we do is important, the work that you do is important, right?
Mm-hmm.
Conversations would be open, and the gap that exists between city workers and New Yorkers,
Mm-hmm.
and the rest of the public would be bridged, and we
Mm-hmm.
would have constructive things, and we could be the progressive city that we tell people and we beat our chests about that we are.
Mm-hmm.
And my last comment regarding, you mentioned Eric Adams. It's just interesting, right, that he's propped up as this as the the alleged front runner, and he hasn't met with city workers.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Our group has reached out multiple times. We've reached out to all three mayoral candidates, and you have been the only one who has responded, and the only one that has met and been intentional about spending time with city workers. And so it says something when the working class mayoral candidate is not opting to meet with city workers, the workforce that will be
Mm-hmm.
working directly under him to serve the city of New York,
Right.
a workforce that is dwindling fast, and if things are not done to address that workforce, New York is going to suffer from
Yeah.
the lack of city workers that will be left.
Yes. Jeremiah, how could people get involved with city workers for New York City, and learn more about your organization and the work that you're doing?
You could definitely follow us on Twitter or Instagram at City Workers, the number 4 NYC. There we have all our content, all our posts, and you can reach out to us via Instagram or Twitter. We are a rapid response group. We respond very quickly,
Yes, we
and we put everything there. So yeah, and thank you again for this opportunity. I greatly appreciate it.
Thank you, Jeremiah, and thank you everyone for tuning into Convos con Cathy. As I mentioned in the beginning, this is a people power campaign, so please remember to click the link in our bio, and please donate whatever you can so that we could continue to disseminate our platform.
Yeah.
Thank you all very much.